Welcome back to the show. Coach Mangini is here with part 2 of Coach's Keys. Yesterday, Coach broke down the 3 keys to an Eagles victory, which honestly I thought were a little bit pessimistic. So today we're focusing on what 3 things the Chiefs need to do to lock in the 3-peat. And we're starting with a guy who just had 3 touchdowns against the Commanders. Coach, take it away.
Yeah, so this first key is one that I talked to prior to the Washington game, and obviously it didn't really hit with them. The first thing you got to do is you got to limit Saquon Barkley to singles and doubles. And I've talked about this a lot. He's so explosive, and there's going to be those plays where he gets 10, 15, maybe even 20, the single or double. You just can't have the 50 yards. And what did Washington do first play of the game? He goes for 65. But let's just look at him historically. So he's now at 9 runs of wow. 50 or more yards, and that compared to Adrian Peterson, Barry Sanders, and these are all within 1-score games. So the good news is that Kansas City's one of the better teams in terms of missed tackles. They're 8th in terms of missed tackles defensively. Now the bad news is Washington was 5th. So you can see that.
Hello.
There's a little bit of a problem, down the field with dealing with him. But the other thing that comes into play with Barkley is he's got 77 plays this season where he's had 0 or negative yards. Okay, so that's a key component of this. If you can that's the most in the NFL by far.
So it's like he kind of is having a Barry Sanders season.
It is.
He's always been an element of that.
Yeah, so those 0 and negative yard runs, if you can have the singles or doubles, maybe those are mixed in, but then you get enough of those 0 and negative yard runs, Kansas City gets a little bit of a lead. Now Philly transitions from moving away from Barkley, which to me is a huge mistake. He typically gets better as the game goes on, but teams will panic, and they'll panic in big moments, move away from that, and now it becomes a passing game, which I think helps Kansas City.
So I'm shocked that the number of 77 runs for 0 or behind the line of scrimmage, because that does it. Stylistically, he doesn't remind me of Barry Sanders at all. But that was, for good or for bad, Barry's career. Like the argument in the 90s about Barry versus Emmett was, Barry was so majestic, but if you needed to pick up a 3rd and 2, you trusted one guy.
He wasn't even in the goal line.
Right, in goal line. And Saquon just strikes me as so much more powerful. Here's what I'll say about the Eagles versus the Chiefs. I'm sorry, Washington versus the Chiefs defensively before you get to your next one. It felt to me like Washington correctly played that game like, man, we're going to have to make splash plays on both sides of the ball. And because I thought that informed how they were trying to tackle Saquon, especially on that very first play. Like, they weren't trying to tackle him, they were trying to strip him. They didn't get it, and then he ends up. That had no business going for 70 yards. I don't think Kansas City is going to look at it like, we have to make this huge play defensively. I think they're going to look at it like, we can't let the huge play happen to us defensively.
Yeah, he's typically around a 20 carry a game guy, and then if he hits you with a little bit of a 10 or 20 yarder, you can live with that. You can't live with the home runs; those break your back. But now if you're mixing in 5 or 6 plays where it's 0, -1. That balance sheet looks totally different, and it plays into Kansas City's.
Yeah, I totally agree, Coach. Like, they can't let the 60, 65-yard run or 2 of those happen, because as much as I've said they need Saquon to run to keep Mahomes off the field, he's not going to give you like a steady diet for 4 quarters of 6 and 7-yard gains. That's just not what he does. He usually racks up, a huge carry, and that helps him get to his 130 yards. So I think that's a great key.
Yep, so the next thing is Kansas City's going to have to protect the ball, and they're going to have to protect the pocket. Okay, and in terms of giveaway, takeaway, Philly's on an incredible run. So they're plus 10 in giveaway, takeaway throughout the playoffs. And when you look at Kansas City, nobody has really done it better than Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City.
It's my graphic.
Because this is such a compelling graphic. When you're 34-1, I mean, teams are in the 90 percentile, typically with winning the giveaway takeaway ratio by plus 2 or 3. Kansas City is incredible, across the board. But now you look at it where they lose the turnover ratio. Okay, so to me, that's a very important factor in this. And looking at the Buffalo game, They have the one turnover, right? And so really it's a 10-point swing. They were going in to score. They give up the field goal. Buffalo comes back and scores a touchdown. So it's a 10-point swing in that game, and that's how impactful those numbers are. So if they can find, the first thing is to protect the ball against this really opportunistic Philly defense. And then when I talk about protecting the pocket, Philly's the same way. They've got 10 sacks this postseason, and Kansas City's been the other way. They've given up 5 sacks. Mahomes has been sacked at the highest rate of his career, and that's where the opportunity is for Philly, and that's what Kansas City's got to protect against. They've got those struggles with the offensive tackles, and the ways that you can protect the pocket, there's multiple ways. You can run the ball a little bit more, you can work in screens, and then Mahomes has really been protecting the pocket himself by using as many scrambles as he's using along the way.
Now I'm starting to feel good about the Eagles. We're going to rename the segment. All right.
Is it working the other way?
Now I'm like, oh, the Eagles. Okay, last key, Coach.
Here's the last thing is you got to apply constant pressure to both the Phillies defense and to their young defensive backs. And Kansas City did that the last time they played with shifting, motioning, and multiple personnel groups. They were almost 80% in the last Super Bowl. Throughout the playoffs, they've been about 80%. And what that does is it forces communication. They line up initially, you've got 11 sets of communication. They motion, there needs to be another 11 sets of communication because you've got to work out who's got what. So by constantly putting pressure on the defense to communicate through the shifts and motions, that's a great thing. And then the other thing they've done is with personnel groups, they've used 13 personnel, which is 3 tight ends, about 23% of the time during this playoff run, where during the season they only use it about 7% of the time. So by mixing in different personnel groups, again, that's another set of defenses that you have to have. Who knows what they're going to have using the Super Bowl, but now the pressure's back on Philly to have to adjust to the things that Kansas City does. Then you've got those 2 young defensive backs, and I've coached rookies in the Super Bowl, and as much as you say this is like any other game, they don't feel that way, and they don't feel that way early. All the players are kind of have that anxiety, but the young players especially. I would say if I'm Kansas City, I'd attack those young guys early. See how well they're dealing with the pressure of the moment early and go after the rookies and see whether or not they can hold up.
How nervous is, because the people don't know, before you're defensive coordinator, you're defensive backs coach with New England, how nervous is the defensive backs coach that 2 of their key defensive personnel on the back end, probably 2 of their 3 best, are rookies, Quinion Mitchell and Cooper?
Well, both those guys have played really well,
been awesome.
and they've played a lot during the course of the season, so that gives you more confidence. But this is a totally different type of moment, and even the older guys getting past the fact that it's the Super Bowl and just another game, it takes some time. But for younger guys, the one edge you can have is sometimes you're young and dumb. You don't even know. You don't even know what's at risk, or you don't kind of get it. You think, oh, we'll go to the Super Bowl everywhere. You don't realize how unique these opportunities can be. But it's hard, and you're working to bring everybody back down to a level.
And in fairness, for the Chiefs young guys,
it's
true. They do go to the Super Bowl. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.